When desperation meets genius, miracles aren't born from money or privilege, they're forged in garage workshops by calloused hands that refuse to give up. Marcus Rivera had $37 in his checking account and a foreclosure notice taped to his apartment door when he decided to build something that would change the world. His neighbors thought he'd lost his mind when they saw him dragging scrap metal and broken electronics into his cramped garage at 3 in the morning. His landlord threatened eviction over the noise. His ex-wife called him delusional, but sometimes the most impossible dreams are the only ones worth chasing, and sometimes a broken-down mechanic with nothing left to lose is exactly what the universe has been waiting for. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning sun cast long shadows across the industrial district of Riverside, California, painting the landscape in shades of rust and ambition. Marcus Rivera stood outside Chen's Auto Repair, staring at the pink slip in his hands for the third time in 10 minutes. The words hadn't changed. After 8 years of loyal service, he was being let go due to financial restructuring. At 41, Marcus had weathered job losses before, but this time felt different. This time he had nothing left to fall back on. The garage around him told the story of a man who understood machines better than people. Every tool had its place, every part had its purpose, and every problem had a solution if you were willing to work hard enough to find it. Marcus had always believed that dedication and skill would eventually pay off, that honest work would provide honest rewards. Now looking around at the organized chaos of his workspace, he realized how naive that belief had been. His Honda Civic wheezed to life on the third attempt, a reminder that even his transportation was hanging by a thread. The drive home through Riverside's declining neighborhoods felt longer than usual, each boarded storefront and abandoned lot a reflection of his own crumbling circumstances. The apartment complex where he'd lived for 3 years looked shabbier in the harsh morning light, its stucco walls bearing the scars of deferred maintenance and broken dreams. The foreclosure notice was still there, bright orange against his weathered door like a neon sign advertising failure. Marcus pulled it down and crumpled it in his fist, but the gesture felt hollow. You couldn't crumple away 3 months of missed rent payments or the reality that his unemployment benefits had run out 6 weeks ago. Inside his studio apartment, the silence was broken only by the hum of a refrigerator that contained little more than condiments and expired hope. Marcus sat at his kitchen table, a piece of furniture he'd built himself from salvaged wood, and spread out his bills like a losing poker hand. Credit cards maxed out, utilities threatening disconnection, and a phone that had been buzzing with calls from collection agencies all week. The mathematics of poverty were simple and brutal. He needed money, and he needed it fast, but every legitimate avenue he'd explored had led to dead ends. His laptop, a refurbished machine held together with electrical tape and determination, displayed job listings that all required experience he didn't have or certifications he couldn't afford. The gig economy offered scraps, food delivery, rideshare driving with a car that might not survive another month, handyman work that barely covered gas money. None of it would generate enough income to dig him out of the hole that seemed to deepen with each passing day. The sound of children playing in the courtyard drifted through his thin walls, a reminder of the life he'd lost when his marriage had crumbled under the weight of financial stress and mismatched dreams. Sarah had wanted stability, a house in the suburbs, children who could attend good schools. Marcus had wanted to build things, to create solutions, to push the boundaries of what was possible. In the end, neither of them had gotten what they wanted. Evening found Marcus in his garage, a cramped space barely large enough for his car and the collection of mechanical projects that had accumulated over the years. Half-finished inventions lined the walls, testimony to a creative mind that had never quite found its commercial application. A prototype water filtration system sat next to an improved carburetor design that had never made it past the concept stage. Each project represented hours of work, moments of inspiration, and the inevitable disappointment of ideas that couldn't pay the bills. But tonight, as Marcus sorted through his tools and wondered which ones he might be able to sell, his attention was drawn to a box tucked behind his workbench. Inside, wrapped in oiled canvas, was the project that had consumed his thoughts for the past 2 years. The Exoskeleton prototype looked like something from a science fiction movie, all servo motors and carbon fiber struts, but it represented the culmination of everything Marcus knew about mechanical engineering, electronics, and human biomechanics. The idea had come to him during a documentary about paralyzed veterans, men and women whose service to their country had cost them their mobility but not their determination to live full lives. Marcus had watched interviews with people who spoke about the simple activities they missed: walking on a beach, standing at their children's graduations, dancing with their spouses. The existing solutions were expensive, clunky, and available only to those with the financial resources to access cutting-edge medical technology. Marcus had begun sketching designs that night, imagining a system that could be built with off-the-shelf components and manufactured at a fraction of the cost of existing solutions. The prototype in the box represented months of 12-hour days, money he couldn't afford to spend, and a vision of technology that could democratize mobility for people who had been forgotten by the medical establishment. The exoskeleton frame was constructed from lightweight aluminum tubing that Marcus had salvaged from bicycle frames and construction sites. The servo motors came from industrial automation equipment that companies had discarded when upgrading their systems. The control electronics were built around open-source microcontrollers and sensors that cost pennies compared to their medical-grade equivalents. Every component had been chosen for its availability, reliability, and affordability. But the most innovative aspect of Marcus's design wasn't the hardware, it was the software. He had taught himself programming out of necessity, spending countless hours writing code that could interpret nerve signals and translate them into mechanical movement. The system used a combination of muscle sensors, accelerometers, and machine learning algorithms to predict the user's intentions and provide assistance only when needed. The prototype was crude compared to the polished devices developed by major corporations, but it worked. Marcus had tested it himself, strapping the lower portion to his legs and experiencing the strange sensation of mechanical muscles augmenting his natural movement. The system could help someone stand from a seated position, maintain balance while walking, and even climb stairs with proper support. More importantly, it could be built for under $5,000 instead of the $100,000 price tags attached to commercial alternatives. Marcus lifted the exoskeleton from its box and examined the connections, checking for corrosion or damage from months of storage. The device represented his best thinking, his most innovative work, and his clearest vision of how technology could serve humanity rather than just generate profits. It also represented a dead end. Without funding for proper testing, regulatory approval, and manufacturing, the exoskeleton would remain a garage curiosity rather than a life-changing innovation. The sound of his phone ringing interrupted his contemplation. The caller ID showed his sister Elena's number, and Marcus hesitated before answering. Elena lived in a different world, married to a successful attorney, and raising 2 children in a neighborhood where Marcus's monthly rent wouldn't cover a week of groceries. She meant well, but her advice always seemed to come from someone who had never experienced real financial desperation. Elena's voice carried the carefully modulated concern of someone who wanted to help but didn't quite understand the problem. She'd heard about his job loss through their mother, and was calling to offer support that came with strings attached. There was a position available at her husband's firm, filing paperwork and managing schedules for attorneys who billed more per hour than Marcus made in a month. The work would be stable, respectable, and soul-crushing for someone who dreamed of building the future rather than organizing the present. Marcus thanked her for thinking of him but declined the offer, explaining that he had other opportunities he was pursuing. It wasn't technically a lie, though the opportunities existed only in his imagination and the collection of unfinished projects surrounding him. Elena's disappointment was audible, but she promised to keep looking for other options and reminded him that family was always there when he needed support. After ending the call, Marcus returned his attention to the exoskeleton, running his fingers along the smooth aluminum frame and imagining the lives it could change if he could find a way to bring it to market. The technology was sound, the need was real, and the potential impact was enormous. What he lacked was the one thing that separated innovative ideas from innovative products: money. The evening news played in the background as Marcus worked on refining the exoskeleton's control algorithms, adjusting parameters and testing responses on a computer simulation he'd built to model human movement. The lead story was about Victoria Ashford, the 23-year-old daughter of tech billionaire David Ashford, who had been paralyzed in a horseback riding accident 6 months earlier. The footage showed her leaving a rehabilitation center in a state-of-the-art wheelchair, her father beside her looking haggard and helpless despite his enormous wealth. Marcus paused his work and turned up the volume, studying the young woman's face as reporters shouted questions about her recovery and future plans. Victoria Ashford had been an accomplished equestrian before her accident, competing at national levels and studying veterinary medicine at Stanford. The accident had occurred during a charity event, when her horse had been spooked by a photographer's flash and thrown her into a fence at high speed. The resulting spinal injury had left her paralyzed from the waist down, ending not just her athletic career but her dream of working with animals. The news report included an interview with David Ashford, whose Ashford Technologies had revolutionized cloud computing and made him one of the wealthiest men in California. Despite his resources, he seemed diminished by his daughter's condition, speaking about the limitations of current medical technology and the frustration of being unable to solve a problem that money alone couldn't fix. He mentioned consulting with specialists around the world, exploring experimental treatments and funding research into spinal cord repair, but acknowledged that none of these efforts would help Victoria in the immediate future. Marcus found himself studying Victoria's face as she navigated the parking lot in her wheelchair, noting the way she held her shoulders and the determined set of her jaw. She moved with the efficiency of someone who had adapted to new realities without surrendering to them, but there was something in her expression that spoke of dreams deferred rather than dreams abandoned. The reporter mentioned that Victoria had withdrawn from Stanford and was living at her father's estate in Malibu, working with physical therapists and adjusting to life with limited mobility. An idea began forming in Marcus's mind, crazy and desperate and potentially brilliant. David Ashford had unlimited financial resources but had been unable to find a solution to his daughter's paralysis. Marcus had a solution but lacked the resources to develop it properly. The mathematics of the situation were elegant in their simplicity, though the practical challenges of bringing them together seemed insurmountable. Marcus spent the next several hours researching everything he could find about Victoria Ashford's accident, her condition, and her family's attempts to find solutions. Medical privacy laws limited the available information, but news reports and social media posts painted a picture of a young woman struggling to find purpose and independence after a life-changing injury. Her father's wealth had provided access to the best medical care available, but it hadn't been able to restore what she had lost. The more Marcus learned about Victoria's situation, the more convinced he became that his exoskeleton could help her. The device was specifically designed for people with lower spinal cord injuries who retained upper body strength and motor control. The system could work with Victoria's existing muscle groups to provide stability and mobility that would allow her to stand, walk, and engage in activities that were currently impossible from a wheelchair. But approaching the Ashford family presented challenges that went far beyond the technical aspects of the exoskeleton. David Ashford was a public figure who undoubtedly received hundreds of unsolicited proposals from inventors, entrepreneurs, and con artists hoping to profit from his daughter's condition. Security concerns alone would make it difficult for an unknown mechanic from Riverside to gain access to someone of his prominence. Marcus spent the remainder of the night sketching modifications to his exoskeleton design, tailoring the specifications to what he knew about Victoria's injuries and physical condition.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story.
The changes were subtle but significant adjustments to the servo motor placement and control algorithms that would optimize the system for her specific needs. The work gave him something to focus on besides his mounting bills and dwindling options, a purpose that extended beyond his own financial desperation. Dawn found Marcus still in his garage, surrounded by technical drawings and empty coffee cups, refining a presentation that outlined his exoskeleton's capabilities and potential benefits for Victoria Ashford. The document was part technical specification, part business proposal, and part personal manifesto about the democratization of assistive technology. It represented his best attempt to communicate both the practical value of his invention and his sincere desire to help someone whose wealth and circumstances were completely foreign to his own experience. The challenge now was figuring out how to get the proposal into the right hands. Traditional channels seemed impossible: corporate email addresses that would filter out unsolicited messages, assistants trained to screen out cranks and opportunists, security protocols designed to protect the Ashford family from unwanted attention. Marcus needed a different approach, something that would demonstrate his seriousness and competence without triggering the defensive mechanisms that surrounded wealthy families dealing with public tragedies. As he cleaned up his workspace and prepared for another day of job searching and bill dodging, Marcus found himself thinking about the news footage of Victoria Ashford and the determined expression on her face as she navigated the world from her wheelchair. Somewhere in Malibu, a young woman was facing the same morning routine he was, probably wondering what the future held and whether the dreams she'd built her life around could survive the reality of her current circumstances. The difference was that Victoria's father could buy almost anything money could purchase while Marcus couldn't afford next month's rent. But maybe, just maybe, what she needed wasn't something that could be bought. Maybe what she needed was something that could only be built by someone who understood both the mechanics of movement and the psychology of people who refused to accept limitations. Marcus locked his garage and walked back to his apartment, the foreclosure notice crumpled in his pocket and a wild plan taking shape in his mind. He had $37, an eviction notice and an invention that could change someone's life. The mathematics of desperation had led him to this moment, and while he didn't know how the story would end, he was finally ready to find out if his impossible dream was actually possible. The morning stretched ahead of him filled with uncertainty, but for the first time in months Marcus Rivera felt like he had a purpose that extended beyond survival. Somewhere in the distance between his cramped garage and the Ashford estate in Malibu lay a future that neither he nor Victoria could imagine, a future that would be built from aluminum tubing, servo motors, and the kind of desperate hope that turned mechanics into miracles workers. 3 days later, Marcus stood outside the gates of Ashford Technologies holding a messenger bag that contained his entire professional future. The corporate campus sprawled across 50 acres of perfectly manicured landscape, glass and steel buildings that reflected the California sun like monuments to technological progress. Security guards in crisp uniforms monitored visitors with the polite efficiency of people trained to identify threats before they materialized. Marcus had spent those 3 days crafting his approach, researching David Ashford's background and business philosophy, looking for angles that might give him access to someone whose time was measured in millions of dollars per hour. Ashford Technologies had built its reputation on disruptive innovation, backing projects that traditional investors considered too risky or unconventional. The company's mission statement spoke about using technology to solve humanity's most pressing challenges, though Marcus suspected that accessibility for disabled individuals wasn't high on their current priority list. The breakthrough had come when Marcus discovered that David Ashford would be speaking at a biomedical engineering conference at UCLA the following week. The event was open to the public, though registration fees put it beyond Marcus's current budget. However, conferences always needed volunteers to help with logistics, and Marcus had successfully applied to work registration and technical support in exchange for access to the presentations. But standing outside Ashford Technologies, Marcus realized he needed to take a more direct approach. The conference was 6 days away, and 6 days was time he didn't have. His landlord had already begun eviction proceedings, and the utility companies were no longer accepting promises instead of payments. If he was going to make his pitch to David Ashford, it needed to happen soon. The security checkpoint was staffed by a woman in her 50s whose nameplate identified her as Carol Matthews. She had the kind of efficient professionalism that came from years of dealing with everyone from confused delivery drivers to corporate executives running late for board meetings. When Marcus explained that he had developed assistive technology that might help Victoria Ashford, her expression shifted from polite attention to practiced skepticism. Carol had obviously handled similar requests before, and her response followed a well-rehearsed script. Mr. Ashford received numerous proposals and suggestions regarding his daughter's condition, but all communications needed to be submitted through proper channels. She provided him with a website address and email contact information, promising that his materials would be reviewed by the appropriate personnel, though her tone suggested that appropriate personnel were trained to dispose of such materials efficiently. Marcus thanked her and left the campus, but he didn't drive away immediately. Instead, he parked across the street and spent the afternoon observing the rhythm of the corporate complex, noting shift changes, delivery schedules, and the comings and goings of employees and visitors. The exercise reminded him of troubleshooting complex mechanical problems. Understanding the system's normal operation was the first step toward finding ways to work within it or around it. That evening, Marcus composed the most important email of his life. The message was addressed to David Ashford's public communications account, but Marcus knew it would be filtered through layers of assistance and screening software before reaching human eyes. He kept the message brief and specific, focusing on technical details that would distinguish his proposal from the typical unsolicited offers that probably flooded Ashford's inbox. The subject line read, "Exoskeleton prototype for spinal cord injury, working device available for demonstration." The body of the email described his background in mechanical engineering, the specific capabilities of his exoskeleton design, and his willingness to provide a live demonstration without any financial commitment from the Ashford family. Marcus attached technical specifications, photographs of the prototype, and a video of the device in operation, though he knew attachments from unknown senders were unlikely to make it through corporate security filters. After sending the email, Marcus returned to his garage to continue refining the exoskeleton software. The device had evolved significantly since his initial prototype, incorporating feedback from online forums where engineers shared information about assistive technology development. The community was small but passionate, filled with people who combined technical expertise with personal experience of disability, either their own or that of family members. One particularly valuable contributor was Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a biomedical engineer who had become paralyzed in a skiing accident and now worked on improving assistive devices from the perspective of both designer and user. Her comments on Marcus's posted videos had helped him refine the exoskeleton's user interface and improve the responsiveness of the control algorithms. She had also connected him with manufacturers who specialized in components for assistive devices, though the minimum order quantities were still beyond his budget. Walsh had been following Marcus's project for months, offering technical advice and encouragement through private messages that had become an important source of motivation during his darkest moments. She understood the frustration of seeing solutions to real problems stalled by financial barriers and regulatory obstacles. Her own research at UC San Diego focused on similar challenges, though her work was supported by university resources and federal grants that Marcus could only dream about accessing. The email from Dr. Walsh arrived 2 days after Marcus had sent his message to David Ashford. She had seen news reports about Victoria Ashford's accident and was aware of Marcus's intention to reach out to the family. Her message was supportive but realistic about the challenges he faced in gaining access to someone of David Ashford's prominence. She offered to serve as a professional reference if needed and suggested that Marcus consider attending the biomedical engineering conference where Ashford was scheduled to speak. Marcus appreciated the support, but he had already committed to working the conference as a volunteer. More importantly, he was beginning to doubt whether a formal presentation to David Ashford was the right approach. The billionaire was undoubtedly being advised by medical experts and technology specialists who had access to resources and information that Marcus couldn't match. What Marcus offered wasn't necessarily better technology, it was different technology, designed from a fundamentally different perspective about accessibility and affordability. The insight came to Marcus while he was adjusting the exoskeleton's hip joint assembly, fine-tuning the balance between stability and flexibility that would allow natural movement without sacrificing support. Commercial assistive devices were designed by teams of engineers working in corporate environments, optimizing for regulatory approval, manufacturing efficiency, and profit margins. Marcus's approach was fundamentally different. He was designing for individual needs, creative problem solving, and the kind of iterative improvement that could only happen when the inventor and user worked together closely. This realization led Marcus to reconsider his strategy for reaching Victoria Ashford. Instead of trying to pitch her father on the business potential of his invention, perhaps he should focus on demonstrating its practical value to Victoria herself. The challenge was finding a way to make that demonstration happen, given the security and privacy concerns that surrounded the Ashford family. The solution came from an unexpected source. Marcus had been following Victoria's social media accounts, not to invade her privacy but to understand her interests and activities as they related to mobility and independence. Her posts were infrequent and carefully curated, but they revealed someone who was struggling to find new ways to engage with activities she had loved before her accident. One post in particular caught Marcus's attention. Victoria had shared a photograph of therapeutic horseback riding equipment, commenting on the challenges of adapting equestrian activities for people with spinal cord injuries. The post included a location tag for a rehabilitation center in Ventura County that specialized in adaptive sports and recreational therapy. The facility offered programs for people with various disabilities, including sessions that combined traditional physical therapy with outdoor activities. Marcus spent the next day researching the rehabilitation center and its programs. The Pacific Coast Adaptive Sports Center was located on a ranch about 90 minutes north of Los Angeles, offering everything from wheelchair basketball to adaptive surfing. The center's philosophy emphasized independence and capability rather than limitation, an approach that aligned perfectly with Marcus's own thinking about assistive technology. More importantly, the center's programs were open to the public, though they required advance registration and medical clearance for participation. The facility's website included testimonials from participants who described the psychological and physical benefits of engaging in adapted sports, many of whom mentioned the importance of maintaining connections to activities they had enjoyed before their injuries. Marcus called the center and spoke with Maria Santos, the program coordinator who handled new participant registrations. She explained the facility's approach to adaptive sports and described the various programs available for people with spinal cord injuries. When Marcus mentioned his interest in demonstrating assistive technology, Maria's enthusiasm was immediately apparent. The center regularly hosted equipment demonstrations and encouraged innovation in adaptive devices, particularly when the focus was on practical applications rather than commercial promotion. Maria agreed to schedule a demonstration session if Marcus could provide appropriate documentation of his device's safety and functionality. She also mentioned that the center occasionally hosted high-profile participants who preferred to maintain privacy while exploring adaptive sports options. While she couldn't discuss specific individuals, her tone suggested that Marcus's timing might be fortuitous. The safety documentation requirements sent Marcus scrambling to compile test data and engineering specifications that would satisfy the center's liability concerns. He spent 18 hours straight preparing materials that demonstrated the exoskeleton stability margins, fail-safe mechanisms, and compatibility with existing safety equipment. The process was exhausting but valuable, forcing him to articulate technical details that he had previously kept in his head. Dr. Walsh provided crucial assistance with the documentation, reviewing Marcus's materials and adding her professional endorsement to the safety analysis. Her credentials as both a biomedical engineer and a person with spinal cord injury gave weight to her assessment that Marcus's device represented a legitimate innovation rather than a garage project that might endanger users. The demonstration was scheduled for the following Thursday, giving Marcus 5 days to transport his equipment to Ventura County and prepare for what might be his only opportunity to show someone from the Ashford family what his exoskeleton could accomplish. The center's adaptive sports programs operated on a regular schedule, and Maria had mentioned that Thursday afternoons often featured participants who preferred smaller group settings and reduced public visibility. Marcus spent those 5 days obsessively refining every aspect of the exoskeleton's operation. He recalibrated the servo motors, updated the control software, and tested every component multiple times to ensure reliable performance. The device represented thousands of hours of work and every dollar he could spare, but more than that, it represented his belief that technology should serve people rather than simply generate profits for corporations. Thursday morning found Marcus loading his equipment into the Honda Civic, which had survived another week despite alarming sounds from the transmission and a check engine light that had become a permanent fixture on the dashboard. The drive to Ventura County was scenic but nerve-wracking, with Marcus constantly listening for mechanical failures that might strand him before his crucial demonstration. The Pacific Coast Adaptive Sports Center occupied a sprawling ranch property with views of the Pacific Ocean and rolling hills covered in coastal sage. The main building was a modern facility designed for accessibility, with wide doorways, ramps instead of stairs, and adaptive equipment integrated seamlessly into the architecture. The outdoor areas included modified sports courts, a swimming pool with specialized lifts, and riding arenas where horses trained in therapeutic programs grazed peacefully. Maria Santos greeted Marcus with the kind of genuine enthusiasm that immediately put him at ease. She was a former Paralympic athlete who had transitioned into adaptive sports administration after her competitive career, and she understood both the technical aspects of assistive devices and the psychological impact of regaining independence through adaptive technology. Her tour of the facility revealed a community of people who had refused to let physical limitations define their possibilities. The demonstration area was a large gymnasium equipped with safety mats, parallel bars, and various pieces of adaptive sports equipment. Marcus spent an hour setting up his exoskeleton and testing its basic functions, while Maria observed and asked technical questions that revealed her sophisticated understanding of biomechanics and assistive technology. Her questions pushed Marcus to explain design decisions and safety features in ways that clarified his own thinking about the device's capabilities. Other participants began arriving for the afternoon session, and Marcus found himself surrounded by people whose approaches to disability challenged every assumption he had made about limitation and adaptation. Wheelchair basketball players discussed strategy and technique with the intensity of professional athletes. Adaptive surfers compared equipment modifications and wave conditions with the expertise of people who had found ways to maintain their connection to activities they loved. The energy in the room shifted when Victoria Ashford arrived, though the change was subtle enough that Marcus almost missed it. She entered through a side door with minimal fanfare, accompanied by a single aide who helped her transfer from her car to the center's sports wheelchair. Victoria moved with the confident efficiency Marcus had observed in the news footage, but seeing her in person revealed details that television couldn't capture. She was smaller than Marcus had expected, maybe 5'4" in her wheelchair, but her presence seemed to fill more space than her physical dimensions would suggest. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and she wore athletic clothing that emphasized function over fashion. Most striking were her eyes, which held the kind of focused intensity that Marcus associated with people who approached challenges as problems to be solved rather than obstacles to be endured. Victoria's interaction with other participants was easy and natural, suggesting that she had been coming to the center regularly and had developed friendships within the adaptive sports community. She spoke with people about their training routines and competition schedules, demonstrating a knowledge of adaptive athletics that went beyond casual interest. When she moved to the parallel bars to begin her own therapy routine, Marcus could see the systematic approach she brought to rebuilding strength and developing new movement patterns. Maria introduced Marcus to the group as an inventor who had developed an innovative assistive device and would be demonstrating its capabilities for anyone interested in observing. She didn't mention Victoria specifically, but Marcus caught the brief eye contact between them that suggested prior coordination. Victoria's expression remained neutral, but Marcus noticed that she positioned herself where she could observe the demonstration clearly. Marcus began by explaining his background and the philosophy behind his exoskeleton design. He emphasized that the device was intended to supplement rather than replace existing mobility aids, providing users with options for different activities and environments. The goal wasn't to cure paralysis but to expand the range of possibilities available to people with spinal cord injuries. The technical demonstration started with Marcus wearing the exoskeleton himself, showing how the device attached to the user's legs and torso and how the control system responded to upper body movements and muscle signals. The audience watched with professional interest as he demonstrated the exoskeleton's ability to assist with standing, walking, and maintaining balance during various activities. But the real test came when Sarah Chen, a participant who had been paralyzed in a motorcycle accident 2 years earlier, volunteered to try the device. Sarah had incomplete spinal cord injury similar to Victoria's condition, retaining some sensation and muscle control in her lower extremities. Marcus helped her into the exoskeleton while Maria and the center's physical therapist observed closely for safety concerns. The moment when Sarah stood upright with the exoskeleton's assistance was electric. The device responded to her intention smoothly, providing support when needed while allowing natural movement when possible. She took tentative steps between the parallel bars, her face showing a mixture of concentration and wonder as she experienced walking motion for the first time since her accident. Victoria's attention during Sarah's demonstration was complete and focused. Marcus could see her analyzing every aspect of the device's operation, probably comparing its capabilities to the various assistive technologies she had already evaluated. Her questions were precise and technically sophisticated, revealing an understanding of biomechanics and engineering that surprised Marcus with its depth. After Sarah completed her trial with the exoskeleton, Victoria approached Marcus directly. Her manner was businesslike but not unfriendly, and Marcus found himself speaking with someone who clearly understood both the technical aspects of assistive devices and the practical realities of living with spinal cord injury. Victoria's questions covered everything from the device's power consumption and charging requirements to its compatibility with existing medical equipment and safety systems. She asked about weather resistance, maintenance procedures, and the potential for customization to accommodate different users' specific needs. Most importantly, she asked about the development timeline and what resources would be needed to bring the device to market. Marcus answered her questions honestly, acknowledging the limitations of his current prototype while explaining his vision for how the technology could be refined and improved with proper funding and development support. He shared his belief that assistive technology should be accessible to everyone who could benefit from it, not just those with the financial resources to afford premium medical devices. The conversation continued for nearly an hour, with Victoria demonstrating an understanding of both technical engineering and business development that reflected her Stanford education and her family's entrepreneurial background. She seemed particularly interested in Marcus's open-source approach to software development and his plans for making the device manufacturable at reasonable cost. As the afternoon session wound down, Victoria asked Marcus if he would be willing to bring his device to her family's estate for a more comprehensive evaluation. She explained that her father had been researching assistive technologies and would be interested in understanding Marcus's approach to solving mobility challenges. The invitation was extended casually, but Marcus understood its significance immediately. The drive back to Riverside felt different than the morning trip. Marcus's Honda Civic still made concerning noises and the check engine light still glowed ominously, but suddenly these problems seemed manageable rather than insurmountable. Somewhere between the adaptive sports center and the freeway, his impossible dream had transformed into an actual opportunity. That evening, Marcus called Dr. Walsh to share the day's developments and seek advice about next steps. Her excitement was obvious, but she also cautioned him about the complexities of working with wealthy families and corporate interests. The Ashford name carried enormous influence in technology circles, but that influence came with expectations and obligations that could be challenging for independent inventors to navigate. Dr. Walsh's advice was practical and strategic. Marcus should prepare for his meeting with David Ashford, developing clear presentations about his technology's capabilities and limitations. He should also be prepared to discuss intellectual property protection, manufacturing partnerships, and the business models that would make his device commercially viable while remaining accessible to users who couldn't afford premium pricing. Most importantly, Dr. Walsh emphasized that Marcus should maintain control over his invention's core mission of democratizing assistive technology. Corporate partnerships could provide resources for development and distribution, but they could also redirect innovative projects toward profit maximization rather than user benefit. The challenge would be finding ways to scale his technology while preserving the values that had motivated its creation. Marcus spent the next 3 days preparing for what might be the most important meeting of his life. His garage workshop became a staging area for technical demonstrations, with every component of his exoskeleton tested and retested for optimal performance. He developed presentation materials that explained his design philosophy, technical specifications, and vision for how assistive technology could be made more accessible to diverse communities. The foreclosure notice was still taped to his door, and his checking account balance had dwindled to $18, but for the first time in months Marcus felt like he was moving towards something instead of running away from failure. Somewhere in Malibu, a billionaire's daughter was probably having similar conversations about hope and possibility, though her circumstances were vastly different from his own. The mathematics of desperation had led Marcus to this moment, but what happened next would depend on factors beyond simple arithmetic. It would depend on whether two people from completely different worlds could find common ground in their shared belief that technology should serve humanity's highest aspirations rather than its lowest common denominators. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of California sunshine that made everything seem possible, and Marcus Rivera was finally ready to discover whether his impossible dream was actually within reach. The Ashford estate in Malibu stretched across 12 acres of oceanfront property, its modern architecture designed to blend seamlessly with the natural landscape while making subtle statements about wealth and technological sophistication. Marcus drove through the security gate in his wheezing Honda Civic, acutely aware of the contrast between his deteriorating vehicle and the pristine environment surrounding him. The driveway curved through carefully maintained gardens where sprinkler systems operated with Swiss precision, maintaining lawns that probably cost more to maintain each month than Marcus earned in a year. David Ashford's home was a masterpiece of contemporary design, all clean lines and floor-to-ceiling windows that offered unobstructed views of the Pacific Ocean. The structure seemed to float above the landscape, supported by steel columns that disappeared into manicured hillsides. Solar panels covered portions of the roof, and Marcus could see wind turbines spinning slowly in the ocean breeze, generating clean energy that powered the estate's operations. Victoria met Marcus at the main entrance, moving efficiently in a high-end wheelchair that probably cost more than his entire exoskeleton prototype. She wore casual clothing suitable for a technical demonstration, but even her relaxed attire carried the subtle markers of quality and expense that separated the wealthy from everyone else. Her manner was professional but warm, suggesting genuine interest in his technology rather than polite obligation to humor a struggling inventor. The interior of the house was as impressive as its exterior, featuring an open floor plan that accommodated wheelchair navigation while maintaining elegant aesthetics. Art covered the walls, pieces that Marcus suspected were originals rather than reproductions, though he lacked the expertise to identify specific artists or estimate values. The overall effect was understated luxury, wealth displayed through quality and refinement rather than ostentation. Victoria led Marcus through the main living areas to a wing of the house that had been converted into a comprehensive rehabilitation facility. The space included physical therapy equipment, medical monitoring devices, and adaptive technology stations where various assistive devices could be tested and evaluated. The facility rivaled anything Marcus had seen in professional medical centers, though it had been designed for the convenience and privacy of a single user. David Ashford was waiting in the rehabilitation facility, and Marcus's first impression was of someone carrying tremendous weight despite enormous resources. The billionaire was smaller than his media appearances suggested, perhaps 5'8", with the kind of lean build that spoke of careful attention to diet and exercise. His clothing was expensive but understated, and his manner combined professional courtesy with the barely contained intensity of someone accustomed to solving problems through the application of intelligence and money. The introductions were brief and businesslike. David Ashford had obviously researched Marcus's background thoroughly, referencing his work history at Chen's Auto Repair and his educational background in mechanical engineering. The billionaire's questions were precise and well-informed, suggesting consultation with technical advisors who had briefed him on the current state of assistive technology development. Marcus began his presentation by explaining his philosophy of accessible innovation, emphasizing that his exoskeleton had been designed specifically to be manufacturable at reasonable cost while maintaining professional performance standards. He acknowledged that his prototype lacked the polish and refinement of corporate-developed devices, but argued that his approach offered advantages in terms of customization, repairability, and affordability. The technical demonstration began with Marcus explaining each component of his exoskeleton system, from the aluminum frame structure to the servo motor assemblies to the control electronics that interpreted user intentions and translated them into mechanical assistance. David Ashford's questions revealed a sophisticated understanding of both engineering principles and business realities, though his primary focus seemed to be on his daughter's specific needs rather than the broader commercial potential of the technology. Victoria's participation in the demonstration was more hands-on than her father's, asking detailed questions about the device's operation while examining its construction and software interfaces. She seemed particularly interested in the customization options, noting that existing commercial devices typically required extensive professional fitting and adjustment, while Marcus's system appeared to accommodate individual users more easily. The moment when Victoria first stood upright in Marcus's exoskeleton was transformative for everyone present. The device responded to her movements smoothly, providing stability and support while allowing natural motion patterns that had been impossible since her accident. Her first steps were tentative but confident, and Marcus could see the psychological impact of regaining vertical mobility in her expression and posture. David Ashford watched his daughter's demonstration with intensity that bordered on desperation. Marcus realized that the billionaire's interest in assistive technology wasn't primarily about business opportunities or technological innovation. It was about a father's desire to restore his daughter's independence and quality of life, goals that money alone had proven incapable of achieving. The walking demonstration lasted nearly an hour, with Victoria testing the exoskeleton's capabilities on various surfaces and in different configurations. She walked on level floors, navigated stairs with assistance, and even attempted some of the balance exercises she had been practicing in traditional physical therapy. Throughout the session, Marcus monitored the device's performance while making minor adjustments to optimize its response to Victoria's specific movement patterns. The most remarkable moment came when Victoria used the exoskeleton to stand beside one of the rehabilitation facility's parallel bars, supporting herself independently while reaching for objects placed at standing height. The simple act of retrieving items from high shelves had been impossible from her wheelchair, but the exoskeleton restored that capability while maintaining the safety and stability she needed for complex movements. After completing the demonstration, Victoria sat down to rest while her father and Marcus discussed the technical and business aspects of the technology. David Ashford's questions covered everything from patent protection and manufacturing scalability to regulatory approval and insurance reimbursement. His approach was systematic and thorough, reflecting years of experience evaluating technological innovations for commercial potential. Marcus answered the questions honestly, acknowledging areas where his development process had been constrained by limited resources while explaining his vision for how the technology could be improved with proper funding and professional support. He emphasized his commitment to keeping the device affordable and accessible, even if that meant accepting lower profit margins than traditional medical technology companies pursued. The conversation shifted when David Ashford began describing the various assistive technologies he had evaluated since Victoria's accident. He had consulted with leading researchers at Stanford, MIT, and Johns Hopkins, funded experimental projects at multiple universities, and purchased every commercial device that showed promise for spinal cord injury rehabilitation. Despite these efforts, none of the existing solutions had provided the combination of functionality, reliability, and user satisfaction that his daughter needed. Victoria rejoined the conversation with observations about the practical differences between Marcus's exoskeleton and the devices she had previously tested. She noted that commercial systems typically required extensive setup time and professional assistance, making them impractical for daily use outside clinical settings. Marcus's device, by contrast, could be donned independently and operated without ongoing technical support, characteristics that were essential for maintaining the independence she valued. The discussion continued through the afternoon, covering topics that ranged from technical specifications to manufacturing logistics to the regulatory challenges that faced innovative medical devices. Marcus found himself impressed by both Ashford's sophistication in analyzing complex technological and business issues, though their perspectives were obviously shaped by resources and experiences completely different from his own. David Ashford's ultimate question was direct and unambiguous. What would Marcus need to refine his prototype into a production-ready device that could benefit not just Victoria but other people with similar injuries? The inquiry carried implications that extended far beyond Marcus's immediate financial problems, touching on opportunities and responsibilities that he had imagined but never seriously expected to encounter. Marcus's response was carefully considered, outlining the resources that would be required for proper engineering validation, regulatory compliance, and manufacturing preparation. He estimated that developing a production version of his exoskeleton would require approximately $2 million and 18 months of focused development work, assuming access to proper facilities and experienced technical staff. The financial figure seemed almost trivial to David Ashford, but he pressed Marcus for details about how the money would be allocated and what specific milestones would measure progress toward production readiness. His questions revealed experience with technology development projects, an understanding of how innovative ideas evolve from laboratory curiosities to commercial products through systematic application of resources and expertise. Victoria's input focused on user experience considerations that would be essential for commercial success. She emphasized the importance of device reliability, noting that assistive technology failures could result in serious injuries for users who depended on mechanical support for mobility and balance. She also stressed the need for comprehensive user training and ongoing technical support, capabilities that would require infrastructure beyond Marcus's current one-person operation. The meeting concluded with David Ashford proposing a formal partnership arrangement that would provide Marcus with the resources needed to develop his exoskeleton while protecting his intellectual property rights and maintaining his control over the project's direction. The proposal was generous but complex, involving equity arrangements, development milestones, and performance metrics that would require legal and financial advisors to evaluate properly. Marcus left the Ashford estate with a business proposal that could transform his life, but also with a deeper understanding of the complexities involved in bringing innovative technology to market. The drive back to Riverside gave him time to process the afternoon's conversations and consider the implications of accepting David Ashford's partnership offer. The contrast between the Ashford estate and Marcus's cramped apartment was jarring, but not in the way he had expected. The billionaire's wealth was obvious and impressive, but what had struck Marcus most forcefully was the genuine desperation beneath David Ashford's composed exterior. Despite unlimited financial resources, he had been unable to solve his daughter's mobility challenges through conventional means, leaving him dependent on outsiders like Marcus who approached problems from different perspectives. Marcus spent that evening researching the legal and business aspects of technology licensing agreements, trying to understand the implications of the partnership David Ashford had proposed. The arrangement would provide immediate financial relief from his mounting debts while funding the development work needed to transform his prototype into a commercial product. However, the agreement would also introduce complications and obligations that could fundamentally change his relationship with his own invention. Dr. Jennifer Walsh proved invaluable in helping Marcus navigate these considerations. Her experience with university technology transfer offices and corporate partnerships provided insights into the potential benefits and pitfalls of working with wealthy investors. She emphasized the importance of maintaining control over the technology's core mission while accepting the realities of commercial development and market distribution. The most significant challenge would be balancing David Ashford's desire for rapid development with Marcus's commitment to accessible pricing and open-source principles. Corporate partnerships typically prioritize profit maximization and market exclusivity, approaches that could conflict with Marcus's vision of democratizing assistive technology for diverse economic communities. Dr. Walsh suggested that Marcus consider establishing a non-profit foundation to oversee the technology's development and distribution, a structure that could accept private funding while maintaining focus on social benefit rather than profit generation. Such an arrangement would be complex to implement but might provide the best framework for advancing the technology while preserving its accessibility mission. The next several days passed in a blur of legal consultations, financial planning, and technical preparation as Marcus worked to respond to David Ashford's partnership proposal. He consulted with intellectual property attorneys about patent applications, met with business advisors about corporate structures, and continued refining his exoskeleton prototype to demonstrate ongoing development progress. The legal aspects of the partnership were more complex than Marcus had anticipated, involving multiple layers of intellectual property protection, development milestone requirements, and performance metrics that would determine future funding allocations. David Ashford's legal team had obviously handled similar technology partnerships before, and their documentation was thorough and professionally crafted. However, Marcus was pleasantly surprised to find that the proposed agreement included provisions protecting his commitment to affordable pricing and open-source development principles. David Ashford had apparently taken seriously Marcus's concerns about maintaining the technology's accessibility, incorporating language that would prevent future commercialization strategies that might price out users with limited financial resources. The technical development timeline was ambitious but achievable, assuming access to proper facilities and experienced engineering support. David Ashford had identified a contract manufacturing company in Orange County that specialized in medical devices and assistive technologies, providing Marcus with resources that would have been impossible to access independently. Victoria's involvement in the development process would be crucial, both as a test user whose feedback would guide design improvements, and as an advocate who understood the practical needs of people with spinal cord injuries. Her combination of personal experience and technical education made her an ideal collaborator for refining the exoskeleton's user interface and operational characteristics. The partnership agreement also included funding for comprehensive safety testing and regulatory compliance processes that would be essential for bringing the device to market, but which Marcus could never have afforded independently. The Food and Drug Administration's approval requirements for assistive medical devices were extensive and expensive, typically costing hundreds of thousands of dollars for devices as complex as Marcus's exoskeleton. 10 days after his initial visit to the Ashford estate, Marcus returned to Malibu to formalize the partnership agreement and begin the collaborative development process. His financial situation had stabilized thanks to an advance payment against future development milestones, allowing him to focus entirely on technical work rather than survival concerns. The transformation in Marcus's circumstances was dramatic but somewhat surreal. 3 weeks earlier he had been facing eviction and contemplating the sale of his tools to pay for basic necessities. Now he was partnering with one of California's most successful technology entrepreneurs on a project that could revolutionize assistive device accessibility for thousands of people. Victoria had prepared a comprehensive wish list of features and improvements that could enhance the exoskeleton's functionality for daily use. Her suggestions ranged from simple ergonomic adjustments to complex software modifications that would customize the device's response patterns for different activities and environments. Her insights reflected months of experience with various assistive technologies and a sophisticated understanding of the practical challenges faced by people with mobility impairments. The development facility that David Ashford had arranged was a dramatic upgrade from Marcus's cramped garage workshop. Located in a modern industrial complex in Irvine, the space included computer-controlled machining equipment, electronics prototyping stations, and testing apparatus that would allow comprehensive evaluation of the exoskeleton's performance under various conditions. Marcus found himself working alongside engineers whose credentials and experience far exceeded his own, though he discovered that his hands-on approach and user-focused design philosophy complemented their more theoretical expertise. The collaboration was productive and educational, pushing Marcus to articulate his design decisions while learning from colleagues who brought different perspectives to technical problem solving. The most significant development came when Victoria began using progressively refined versions of the exoskeleton for extended periods, providing feedback that guided continuous improvements to the device's comfort, reliability, and functionality. Her willingness to serve as a test user for experimental modifications was crucial for identifying practical issues that might not emerge during laboratory testing. However, the collaboration also revealed challenges that Marcus had not anticipated. The development team included specialists in regulatory compliance, manufacturing optimization, and quality control professionals whose priorities sometimes conflicted with Marcus's emphasis on simplicity and accessibility. Debates arose about feature complexity, material costs, and design trade-offs that reflected fundamental differences in approaching technological innovation. The most significant tension emerged around pricing strategy and market positioning. David Ashford's business advisors advocated for premium pricing that would maximize profit margins and fund ongoing research and development. Marcus argued for moderate pricing that would make the device accessible to users without premium insurance coverage or significant personal wealth. Victoria found herself mediating these discussions, bringing both personal experience and business acumen to debates about the technology's commercial future. Her perspective was shaped by awareness that most people with spinal cord injuries lacked the financial resources available to her family, making affordability a crucial factor in the device's potential social impact. The partnership also attracted attention from competitors and critics who questioned whether a garage inventor could develop technology competitive with corporate research laboratories. Industry publications ran articles analyzing Marcus's exoskeleton design with mixed assessments of its technical capabilities and commercial potential. Some critics argued that Marcus's open-source approach to software development would undermine intellectual property protection and reduce incentives for continued innovation. Others questioned whether his emphasis on affordability would compromise device quality and reliability, potentially putting users at risk through inadequate testing and validation. However, the criticism was balanced by support from disability rights advocates and assistive technology researchers who praised Marcus's user-centered design philosophy and commitment to accessibility. Dr. Walsh published articles defending the project and explaining how Marcus's approach addressed genuine gaps in the existing assistive technology market. The regulatory approval process proved more complex and time-consuming than anyone had anticipated. The Food and Drug Administration's requirements for assistive medical devices involved extensive documentation, clinical testing, and safety validation that consumed months of development time and significant financial resources. Marcus found himself navigating a bureaucratic maze that seemed designed to favor large corporations with dedicated regulatory affairs departments over independent inventors with innovative solutions. The process was educational but frustrating, revealing how regulatory barriers could delay beneficial technologies from reaching the people who needed them most. Victoria's involvement in the clinical testing process was invaluable, both as a test subject and as an advocate who could communicate with regulatory officials about the device's practical benefits for users with spinal cord injuries. Her combination of technical knowledge and personal experience provided credibility that helped address regulators' concerns about device safety and effectiveness. The manufacturing preparation phase revealed additional complexities as Marcus's prototype design was adapted for mass production. Components that worked reliably in small quantities required different materials and manufacturing processes when produced at commercial scale, necessitating design modifications that maintained performance while enabling efficient production. The partnership with David Ashford had provided Marcus with resources and opportunities beyond his wildest expectations, but it had also introduced pressures and obligations that complicated his relationship with his own invention. The exoskeleton was no longer just his personal project but had become a commercial enterprise with stakeholders, deadlines, and performance expectations that extended far beyond his original vision.
Despite these challenges, Marcus remained committed to his core mission of democratizing assistive technology for people who had been underserved by existing commercial solutions. The partnership with the Ashford family had created opportunities to achieve that mission at a scale he could never have reached independently, even if the path to success was more complex than he had originally imagined. As the development project approached its first major milestone, Marcus reflected on the journey that had brought him from desperate unemployment to collaboration with one of California's most successful families.
The mathematics of desperation had evolved into the calculus of opportunity, but the core motivation remained unchanged, using technology to restore independence and dignity to people whose lives had been altered by circumstances beyond their control. The exoskeleton prototype had evolved significantly from its origins in Marcus's garage, incorporating improvements in materials, electronics and software that enhanced both performance and reliability. However, the device's fundamental philosophy remained rooted in Marcus's belief that innovation should serve humanity's highest aspirations rather than simply generate profits for corporate shareholders. Victoria's progress with the exoskeleton had exceeded everyone's expectations, including her own. She was now using the device for several hours each day, engaging in activities that had been impossible since her accident while maintaining the safety and confidence essential for independent living. Her experience validated Marcus's design approach while providing insights that would benefit future users with similar needs. The partnership had transformed not just Marcus's financial circumstances but his understanding of how individual innovation could be scaled to serve broader communities through careful collaboration with people who shared similar values despite vastly different backgrounds. The alliance between a struggling mechanic and a billionaire's family had proven that common purpose could bridge economic divides when both parties remained committed to goals larger than personal benefit. David Ashford's support had been crucial for advancing the technology, but Victoria's participation had been equally important for ensuring that development remained focused on user needs rather than abstract technical capabilities. Her willingness to test experimental modifications and provide honest feedback had accelerated improvement cycles while maintaining focus on practical functionality. As autumn approached, Marcus found himself dividing time between the Irvine Development Facility and the Ashford Estate, where ongoing testing and refinement continued under Victoria's guidance. The collaboration had evolved into genuine friendship based on shared commitment to advancing assistive technology accessibility, though their different backgrounds continued to provide complementary perspectives on technical and social challenges. The project's success had also attracted interest from other families dealing with spinal cord injuries, many of whom contacted Marcus directly to inquire about device availability and pricing. These conversations reinforced his commitment to affordable accessibility while highlighting the enormous unmet demand for innovative assistive technologies. However, the growing attention also brought increased scrutiny from competitors and critics who questioned various aspects of the development process. Patent challenges emerged from corporations claiming prior art on certain design elements, forcing Marcus to navigate complex intellectual property disputes while continuing technical development work. The challenges were significant but manageable thanks to David Ashford's legal and financial resources combined with Marcus's determination to protect his invention's core mission. The partnership had created a framework for addressing obstacles that would have been insurmountable for an individual inventor working alone. As the first production units approached completion, Marcus realized that his garage workshop days were definitively behind him. The exoskeleton project had evolved into a commercial enterprise with employees, facilities, and responsibilities that extended far beyond his original vision of helping a few individuals with mobility challenges. The transformation had been extraordinary, but it had also preserved the essential elements that had motivated Marcus's original work. The device remained focused on user needs rather than corporate profits, accessible pricing remained a priority, and open-source principles continued to guide software development despite pressures toward proprietary approaches. Victoria's gratitude for the mobility independence she had regained was obvious, but Marcus had come to understand that their partnership had benefited him equally. Her insights, feedback, and advocacy had transformed his rough prototype into a sophisticated device capable of changing lives on a scale he had never imagined possible. The collaboration between a desperate mechanic and a determined young woman had proven that innovation could emerge from the most unlikely partnerships when both parties remained committed to serving purposes larger than their individual circumstances. The exoskeleton project had become a testament to the power of human creativity when supported by adequate resources and guided by genuine compassion for people facing extraordinary challenges. The boardroom at Ashford Technologies buzzed with tension as Marcus faced the most hostile audience of his life. 12 executives from Titan Medical Systems had flown in from Boston specifically to challenge his exoskeleton project, armed with patent lawsuits, regulatory complaints, and a proposal to acquire his technology for a fraction of its true value. Their lead attorney, a sharp-featured woman named Catherine Mills, spread documents across the polished conference table like weapons being prepared for battle. Titan Medical had dominated the assistive technology market for 15 years, charging premium prices for devices that served only the wealthiest patients. Marcus's affordable exoskeleton threatened their business model in ways that went far beyond simple competition. If his device succeeded, it would prove that life-changing technology didn't require corporate research budgets or luxury pricing to deliver genuine innovation. Mills began her presentation with calculated precision, arguing that Marcus's design infringed on 17 different patents held by Titan Medical. She produced technical diagrams and legal precedents, building a case that could tie up the project in litigation for years while draining the financial resources that David Ashford had committed to development. Her strategy was transparent but effective: destroy the project through legal attrition rather than technical competition. Victoria sat at the far end of the conference table, using Marcus's latest exoskeleton prototype to stand and move around the room while the lawyers debated intellectual property law. Her demonstration was more powerful than any verbal argument, showing 12 skeptical executives exactly what their opposition was trying to prevent from reaching the public. The device responded to her movements fluidly, providing support and stability that allowed natural motion patterns impossible with traditional assistive technologies. David Ashford's response to Titan Medical's threats was swift and decisive. He authorized his legal team to file countersuits challenging the validity of Titan's patents while simultaneously accelerating the exoskeleton's development timeline. His message was clear: attempts at intimidation would be met with overwhelming force backed by resources that dwarfed even Titan Medical's corporate treasury. The legal battle escalated quickly, drawing attention from technology journalists, disability rights advocates, and venture capitalists who recognized the broader implications of the conflict. Marcus found himself at the center of a corporate war that extended far beyond his original goal of helping individuals with mobility challenges. The stakes had grown to include the future direction of assistive technology development and the question of whether innovation should serve corporate profits or human needs. Media coverage of the dispute was extensive and generally favorable to Marcus's position. Reporters contrasted his garage workshop origins with Titan Medical's corporate headquarters, framing the conflict as a battle between grassroots innovation and entrenched monopoly power. Victoria's participation in interviews and demonstrations provided compelling evidence of the exoskeleton's practical benefits, while her articulate advocacy highlighted the limitations of existing commercial alternatives. The breakthrough came when Dr. Walsh's research team at UC San Diego published a comprehensive analysis of assistive technology patents, demonstrating that Titan Medical's intellectual property claims were based on overly broad interpretations of prior art. The academic study provided legal ammunition for challenging the patent lawsuits while establishing scholarly credibility for Marcus's innovative approach to exoskeleton design. However, Titan Medical's response was to escalate beyond legal challenges into direct sabotage attempts. Security cameras at the Irvine development facility captured corporate espionage activities, including attempts to steal prototypes and access proprietary software code. The incidents forced David Ashford to implement military-grade security measures while filing criminal complaints against Titan Medical's contracted investigators. The sabotage attempts backfired spectacularly, generating negative publicity that damaged Titan Medical's reputation while creating sympathy for Marcus's underdog position. Disability rights organizations rallied around the exoskeleton project, organizing protests outside Titan Medical facilities and launching social media campaigns highlighting the company's attempts to suppress affordable innovation. Victoria's role in these advocacy efforts was crucial, providing a compelling spokesperson who could articulate both the technical benefits of Marcus's device and the broader social implications of the corporate conflict. Her personal story resonated with audiences who understood that access to life-changing technology shouldn't depend on family wealth or premium insurance coverage. The regulatory approval process became another battleground, with Titan Medical lobbying FDA officials to impose additional testing requirements that would delay the exoskeleton's market introduction. However, Marcus's comprehensive documentation and Victoria's extensive testing data provided strong evidence of the device's safety and effectiveness, while support from academic researchers and medical professionals countered Titan's regulatory interference. The turning point came during a public demonstration at the National Spinal Cord Injury Conference in Chicago, where Victoria used Marcus's exoskeleton to deliver a keynote presentation while standing and walking naturally across the stage. The audience of medical professionals, researchers, and patients with spinal cord injuries gave her a sustained standing ovation, recognizing both her personal achievement and the broader significance of the technology she was demonstrating.
The conference demonstration generated international media attention and attracted inquiries from medical centers around the world interested in evaluating Marcus's exoskeleton for their patients. Orders began arriving from hospitals, rehabilitation facilities, and individual users who had been waiting years for affordable assistive technology that could restore meaningful mobility. Titan Medical's final attempt to derail the project involved a hostile takeover bid for Ashford Technologies, hoping to gain control over Marcus's intellectual property through corporate acquisition. However, David Ashford had anticipated this possibility and structured his company's ownership to prevent unwanted buyouts while maintaining family control over strategic decisions. The takeover attempt failed decisively, but it prompted David Ashford to accelerate plans for bringing Marcus's exoskeleton to market through direct sales rather than traditional medical device distribution channels. The approach would bypass Titan Medical's influence over established healthcare networks while providing faster access for users who needed the technology immediately. Production of the first commercial exoskeleton units began 6 months ahead of the original schedule, with manufacturing taking place at facilities in California, Texas, and North Carolina. The distributed production strategy reduced costs while creating jobs in communities that had been affected by industrial decline, fulfilling Marcus's vision of technology development that benefited diverse economic regions. The device's commercial launch exceeded everyone's expectations, with initial production runs selling out within weeks of becoming available. Customer testimonials documented life-changing improvements in mobility, independence, and quality of life for users with various types of spinal cord injuries. The success validated Marcus's belief that affordable innovation could serve markets that corporate research had ignored or abandoned. The device's commercial launch exceeded everyone's. Customer testimonials documented Victoria's gratitude for the mobility restoration she had achieved with Marcus's exoskeleton was expressed through her decision to establish a foundation dedicated to making assistive technology accessible to underserved communities. The Victoria Ashford Foundation provided grants, training programs, and technical support for individuals and organizations working to democratize access to life-changing devices. Marcus found himself traveling internationally to consult on adaptive technology projects and speak at conferences about innovation methodologies that prioritized user needs over corporate profits. His garage workshop had been replaced by a modern facility, but his commitment to hands-on problem-solving and direct user engagement remained unchanged. The partnership between Marcus and the Ashford family had evolved into a permanent collaboration focused on advancing assistive technology accessibility worldwide. David Ashford's business expertise and financial resources, combined with Victoria's user insights and advocacy skills, provided a framework for developing innovations that served humanity's highest aspirations. Titan Medical's attempts to suppress Marcus's exoskeleton had ultimately accelerated its success by generating publicity and support that would have taken years to achieve through conventional marketing. The corporate opposition had transformed a promising invention into a symbol of innovation democracy, inspiring other inventors to challenge established monopolies through creative engineering and determined advocacy. The legal battles concluded with comprehensive victories for Marcus's position, establishing precedents that would protect future innovators from patent abuse and corporate intimidation. The court decisions recognized that genuine innovation deserved protection from attempts to suppress competition through frivolous litigation and regulatory manipulation. 2 years after Marcus had spent his last $37 on prototype components, he stood before the United Nations Commission on Disability Rights to present his exoskeleton as a model for technology development that prioritized human dignity over corporate profits. Victoria accompanied him to the presentation, using the device to demonstrate its capabilities while advocating for international standards that would ensure assistive technology accessibility for all economic communities. The mechanics of desperation had transformed into the engineering of hope, proving that individual creativity could change the world when supported by people who shared similar values despite vastly different circumstances. Marcus's impossible dream had become a global reality, touching thousands of lives while establishing new paradigms for innovation that served humanity's greatest needs. The exoskeleton project had succeeded beyond Marcus's wildest expectations, but its greatest achievement was demonstrating that technology could be a force for equality rather than division when developed by people who understood that true innovation measured success in lives changed rather than profits generated. The collaboration between a struggling mechanic and a determined young woman had proven that the most powerful partnerships emerge when shared purpose transcends individual service. Marcus Rivera's garage workshop had been empty for 18 months, but the spirit of hands-on innovation that had characterized his early work continued to guide the global expansion of accessible assistive technology. His story had become proof that ordinary people could accomplish extraordinary things when they refused to accept that limitations were permanent, and that the most important inventions emerged from the desire to help others rather than personal enrichment. Victoria Ashford's gratitude had indeed changed everything, but not in the way anyone could have predicted. Her willingness to test experimental technology and experiment technology had transformed a desperate mechanic's last hope into a worldwide movement that was redefining the relationship between innovation and accessibility. The partnership had created something larger than either participant could have achieved independently, demonstrating that the most meaningful collaborations transcend economic and social boundaries when both parties remained committed to purposes larger than themselves. The future held unlimited possibilities for assistive technology development, guided by principles that Marcus and Victoria had established through their unlikely partnership. Their success had inspired a new generation of inventors who understood that true innovation required not just technical skill but also genuine compassion for people facing extraordinary challenges. The Exoskeleton project had become a blueprint for engineering solutions that served humanity's highest aspirations, while proving that the most powerful technologies emerged from the marriage of desperate necessity and determined hope. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.